My brother mocked my daughter for stuttering at his engagement party, so I skipped the wedding, but now he's alone because his wife divorced him after he was cruel to his sister, who has dyslexia. My brother Colin, who's 35, and I, 32, grew up together in what most people would consider a normal family. We shared a room until we were teenagers, fought over the remote, and generally did what siblings do. Even as adults, we remained close. We'd talk on the phone every few weeks, celebrate holidays together, and our kids would play at family gatherings. Colin has always had a habit of making comments that sound helpful, but really aren't. Like when I was getting divorced 3 years ago and he'd say things like, maybe if you hadn't been so focused on work, things would have turned out better. Or when I bought my house last year and he said, it's nice you found something you can actually afford. I used to believe he meant well, he just didn't know how to express himself properly. My daughter Ariana, who's 9, has been struggling with a stutter since she was 6. It started gradually after the divorce, which the speech therapist said was normal for kids going through family changes. Some days, she speaks perfectly fine. Other days, certain words just won't come out right at all. We've been working with a speech therapist for 2 years, and she's made a lot of progress. But the issue still lingers. The stuttering bothers her more than she lets on. Sometimes she avoids speaking in class or gets so frustrated that she goes completely silent when words won't come out properly. At home, I never rush her or finish her sentences, I just wait. The therapist told me the best thing we can do is be patient and not draw attention to it. Colin knew about Ariana's stutter. It's impossible to hide during family events, but he never seemed to understand that it wasn't something she could control. He'd say things like, Ariana just needs to slow down, or she'll grow out of it if she practices more. I tried to gently correct him, explaining what the therapist had told us, but he would just nod and change the subject. 6 months ago, Colin got engaged to his girlfriend Dana, who's 29. Dana seems like a kind person, though I don't know her very well. They decided to host the engagement party at our parents' house since it has a big backyard. They invited the whole extended family, uncles, cousins, grandparents, about 30 people in total. Ariana was excited about the party. She had been practicing a short speech she wanted to give to congratulate Uncle Colin and Dana. She wrote it herself and had been reading it aloud to me for weeks to practice. It was sweet and simple, just a few sentences about how happy she was for them and how much she liked having Dana in the family. The party was going great. Everyone was chatting, eating, and enjoying themselves. Colin and Dana were going around greeting guests and thanking them for coming. After dinner, my dad asked for everyone's attention so Colin could give a toast. Colin thanked everyone for coming and spoke about how happy he was to be with Dana. That's when Ariana tugged on my sleeve and whispered that she wanted to give her speech. I asked Colin if she could say a few words, and he said, of course. I helped Ariana climb onto a chair so everyone could see her. She started speaking, and the first sentence went smoothly. But when she got to the word congratulations, she got stuck. She tried to say it, repeating the CUH sound again and again. She looked frustrated, but I smiled at her encouragingly and waited patiently. Then Colin cut in. He said impatiently, come on, Ariana, just say it already, everyone's waiting. Ariana tried again, but now she was more nervous, and the stuttering worsened. She started the word 3 more times and couldn't get past the first syllable. Colin let out a loud sigh and said, this is taking forever. Ariana, you need to think before you speak. Just talk slowly and say the word right. The whole party fell silent. Ariana's cheeks flushed red. She looked down, stepped off the chair, and walked away without finishing her speech. She came over to me and buried her face in my side. I felt her trembling. I told Colin that we needed to talk, but he brushed me off with a wave and said, she'll be fine. Kids need to learn how to communicate properly. You can't baby her forever. I told him that Ariana has a medical condition, that she's been working with a speech therapist, and that what he did was just plain cruel. He claimed he was only trying to help her improve and that I was being overly sensitive. I gathered our things and took Ariana home. She didn't say a single word during the entire drive. When we got home, she went straight to her room and stayed there the rest of the night. Am I the villain for refusing to attend my brother's wedding after he publicly humiliated my daughter? Edit. For those asking about the fiancé, my future sister-in-law, she called me to apologize for my brother. She said she would talk to him, but either she hasn't or she wasn't able to convince him to change his mind. Update 1. The wedding was last Saturday. I didn't go. Ariana and I spent the day at the Children's Museum. She loves the interactive science exhibits, and we spent hours building things and doing experiments. I wanted to do something with her that day because I knew she was aware of the wedding, and I didn't want her sitting at home thinking about it. She was talking normally all day, asking questions, explaining things to me. It was the first time since the engagement party that I heard her speak so freely, without seeming worried about her words. While we were there, I got several messages from family members who were at the wedding. My cousin sent me pictures of the ceremony and the reception. Everyone looked happy. Colin looked handsome in his tuxedo, and Dana's dress was beautiful. Part of me felt sad for not being there to see my brother get married. But then, on Sunday morning, my aunt called to tell me everything that had happened at the reception. Apparently, during the speeches, Colin decided to bring up the situation and mentioned that he was disappointed certain people hadn't attended due to minor, resolvable differences. I found that ridiculous. Because yes, I do believe our differences could have been resolved, but only if he had made any effort to resolve them. Instead, what he wanted was for me to come and apologize. That's what he calls resolving things. But that wasn't even the worst part. That was just the appetizer. According to my aunt, Colin then said he hoped that his future children would be raised to be stronger and more resilient, unlike certain kids in the family who are raised like whiny little crybabies. I don't think I was the only one affected by that comment, because my aunt said the entire room went quiet. Apparently, my mom looked horrified. But Colin kept going. He said that kids today are too sensitive, and that parents who don't push their children to overcome challenges are doing them a disservice. And the disaster didn't stop there. My dad's sister, Aunt Joyce, has a son with autism. Colin knows this. Her son, Tommy, who's 12, has speech delays and social challenges. After Colin's speech, Aunt Joyce gathered her family and left the reception early. She didn't say goodbye to anyone, just picked up their things and walked out. My mom called me Sunday night in tears. She said she was ashamed of what Colin had said, and she completely understood why I hadn't come. She told me Colin had crossed a line and that she was going to have a serious talk with him. But the call that affected me the most was from Tommy's mom, my Aunt Joyce. She called Monday afternoon and shared what happened from her perspective. She said that when Colin started talking about sensitive children and how they needed to be tougher, she immediately thought of both Ariana and Tommy. She told me she felt like Colin wasn't just attacking Ariana, he was attacking any child who needed extra support or understanding. Joyce told me she had always admired Colin because he seemed so put together and successful. But after hearing him speak that way about children with challenges, she said she saw him in a whole new light. She told me she couldn't just sit there listening to someone in her own family basically say that kids like Tommy were weak, or that their parents were failing them. The conversation that really opened my eyes happened on Tuesday. My mom called to tell me about her talk with Colin. She said she went to his house on Monday night to discuss what he had said at the wedding. According to my mom, Colin stood by everything he had said. He told her that Ariana's speech issues were my fault either because I don't know how to discipline her or ultimately because I got divorced and created all that stress in the first place. He said that if I had tried harder to save my marriage, Ariana wouldn't have developed a stutter. Then he said something that made my mom hang up on him. He told her that Ariana's stutter was probably fake or exaggerated, and that she was just using it to get attention after the divorce. He said kids are manipulative and will use any excuse to avoid doing things they don't want to do. My mom was so upset telling me this that she could barely speak. She said she had never realized how cruel Colin could be, and that she was starting to understand why his first marriage ended in divorce 5 years ago. That's when she told me something I didn't know. Apparently, Colin's ex-wife, Rachel, had tried to talk to my mom during the divorce. Rachel wanted to share her side of the story, but my mom thought it wasn't appropriate to get involved in marital problems, so she never listened. After what happened at the wedding, my mom decided to reach out to Rachel. They met for coffee yesterday, and Rachel told her things that explain a lot about Colin's behavior. Rachel said that Colin had always been critical and controlling, but things got worse after they had kids. Their son Jack, who's now 8, had some learning difficulties in kindergarten. Instead of seeking help, Colin insisted Jack was just lazy and needed to try harder. When Rachel suggested evaluating Jack for potential learning disabilities, Colin refused. He said she was just making excuses to justify their son's failures. The breaking point came when Jack started experiencing anxiety about school because he couldn't keep up with his classmates. Colin told Jack he was embarrassing the family and needed to stop making excuses and push himself harder. Rachel said Jack began having nightmares and didn't want to go to school anymore. That's when Rachel decided she couldn't stay married to someone who treated their son that way. She filed for divorce and got full custody of Jack. Colin hardly sees his son now because Rachel doesn't trust him not to damage Jack's self-esteem even more. And honestly, Colin doesn't seem interested in his defective son, as he's apparently called him. All of this was news to me. I've kept in touch with Rachel, but she never told me any of this. Neither of them did, Colin, for obvious reasons, and Rachel, which surprised me. I didn't even know Rachel had full custody. The few times we saw Jack were when Rachel was invited and brought him along. On other occasions, Colin's excuse was always that it was Rachel's weekend. My mom said she feels awful for not listening to Rachel all those years ago, and for not seeing the signs of how Colin treats kids who need extra support or patience. Ariana still doesn't know most of what happened at the wedding. I haven't heard from Colin since the wedding either, which is probably for the best. My mom told me he's angry because several family members are siding with me, and he feels like everyone is against him. But from what I can see, people aren't siding with me, they're forming their own conclusions based on what they saw and heard at his wedding. All I know is, I have no regrets about missing the wedding. It would have been even worse than the engagement party. I can't imagine how hurt Ariana would have been if she'd heard her uncle basically call her weak and manipulative. Update 2. First, the good news about Ariana. Her speech therapist says she's made significant progress since we stopped attending family events where Colin might be present. Ariana has started volunteering to read out loud in class again, and last week, she gave a presentation on her science project without any major issues. The therapist believes that removing the stress and pressure of family situations has helped her regain confidence. Secondly, the situation with Colin has become bigger than I ever expected. I've been talking to Rachel since finding out everything she shared. I needed to understand why she never told me any of it. Her answer was that she felt awkward talking to her ex-husband's sister, which I completely understand. But that's not all that came out of that conversation. Rachel told me that during her custody battle, Colin's lawyer actually tried to use Jack's learning difficulties as an argument for why Colin should have full custody, to protect Jack from getting even worse under Rachel's care. Let me be clear, Jack has improved tremendously under Rachel's parenting. I don't know if I could say the same if my brother had been granted full or even shared custody. Rachel apologized for not telling me all of this sooner, but she said she never thought Colin would be cruel enough to do the same thing to his niece. And up until now, he hadn't, or at least I hadn't seen it. Because apparently, this isn't new behavior for him. That conversation led me to call my mom and ask her some very direct questions about Colin, things I'd never asked before. I wanted to know if there were other incidents with children in the family that I might have missed or forgotten. When I was 15 and Colin was 18, our cousin David, who was around 7 at the time, came to stay with us for a week while his parents were dealing with a family emergency. David wet the bed a couple of times during his stay, which is completely normal for a little kid in a stressful situation. But instead of showing understanding, Colin made his life miserable. He called him a baby, mocked him in front of other relatives, and even threatened to tell David's school friends about the bedwetting once he got home. Mom said David became withdrawn and anxious during the visit and never wanted to stay with us again. I remember not being home much that week because I was working at a children's camp organizing activities for 3 weeks. My mom told me she's carried guilt about that for years because she saw how much harm Colin did to David with his behavior. David is an adult now, has kids of his own, and rarely attends family gatherings. When I asked my mom why, she said she thinks it's because he never forgot how Colin treated him when he was vulnerable and needed support. I called my cousin Lisa and asked if she remembered Colin being cruel to younger kids when we were growing up. She said she always thought of Colin as kind of a bully, especially toward anyone smaller or weaker than him. Then she told me something that happened at last year's Christmas family party, which I didn't attend for unrelated reasons. Jack, Colin's son, had come with Rachel. During dinner, Jack spilled grape juice on his shirt. According to Lisa, Colin got angry and told Jack he was clumsy and that he was embarrassing him. Jack started crying, and Rachel took him home immediately. And Joyce, Tommy's mom, told me that months ago, Tommy had actually said he didn't like Uncle Colin because he made him feel stupid. Tommy said that at family gatherings, Colin would ask him questions about school or sports, and then act impatient when Tommy took too long to answer. He said Colin would roll his eyes or make comments about how Tommy needed to pay more attention. With all of this information, I decided to have one final conversation with Colin. I called him last week. It didn't go well. Colin was defensive from the start. His excuse was that since he's moving ahead in life, there are a lot of jealous relatives who need this drama to feel better about themselves. Then he said Ariana's issues weren't his responsibility and that I needed to stop expecting everyone else to accommodate her problems. And then he said something that ended our relationship forever. He said Ariana was weak, just like her mother, and that if she kept this up, she'd never get married and would end up alone like me. And here comes the most horrifying part. He said all she really needed was a belt and one afternoon to fix her and turn her into a decent person. I hung up on him. I haven't spoken to him since. My mom called the next day and told me Colin had called her, complaining about our conversation. Apparently, he told her that if the family was going to take sides, then he didn't need us. Obviously, he left out some key parts of the conversation. My mom said he seemed convinced that eventually we'd all apologize to him for not supporting him. But that's not what's happening. In fact, more family members are now coming forward with their own stories about Colin's behavior toward children. Even my dad finally admitted that he always knew Colin had a cruel side. But my dad said he always thought Colin would grow out of it eventually. The saddest part is that Dana, Colin's new wife, seems to have had no idea what kind of person she married. According to my mom, Dana has been calling different family members, trying to understand why everyone has become so distant with Colin. He's still stuck in his bubble, telling himself that what he did was fine, while everyone around him, including his newlywed wife, is starting to see him for who he really is. I hope he doesn't try to crawl back looking for forgiveness, because after everything he said, I don't think I even need to say it, he's dead to me. Update 3. Ariana is doing wonderfully, thank you to everyone who asked. Her speech therapist has spoken of remarkable progress, and that's the best thing a mother can hear about her child. She hasn't been stuttering in most of her conversations for the past month. And on the difficult days, she no longer gets frustrated or ashamed like before. She's been practicing various techniques to work through it, using the tools her therapist taught her. The family situation has settled into a new kind of normal, but it's very different from what it was before. Colin and I haven't had any contact since that final phone call. He blocked me on social media and told our parents that he no longer considers me part of his family. Fine by me, I blocked him too. My mom says Colin is convinced I turned the whole family against him and that he's the real victim in all this. My parents have also cut contact with him, especially after my mom found out exactly what he said during that last conversation, and once the rest of the family heard about it from them. But the most important part, because I'm not really concerned with Colin anymore, was what happened with Dana, his wife. About 6 weeks ago, Dana told me that Colin had started making comments about her younger sister, who has dyslexia. Dana's sister is in high school and struggles with reading, but she receives good support and is doing well overall. According to Dana, Colin began saying that her parents were coddling her sister's learning issues and that she just needed to try harder. Dana said that when she tried to explain to him what dyslexia actually was, Colin dismissed it, saying it was just another thing people made up to spoil kids. I told Dana everything, what had happened with Ariana, and what Colin said in our final conversation. I also put her in touch with Rachel so she could hear firsthand how Colin had treated his own son. Apparently, Colin didn't have much contact with Jack because Rachel had lied in court to take him away from him, that's what he'd told Dana. But now she knows the truth, that Rachel kept Jack away to protect him. Dana filed for divorce 3 weeks ago. She regrets not having filed for an annulment instead. My mom told me that Colin is furious about the divorce. From what she's heard, he blames our entire family for turning Dana against him. He truly believes we conspired to ruin his marriage out of jealousy over how happy he was. But I don't think Dana made her decision because of us. Maybe, just maybe, she decided to divorce him because he's a jerk. Dana said she realized that if they ever had children, Colin would treat them the same way he treated Ariana, Jack, Tommy, and other kids in the family. Even if those children didn't have disabilities, the moment they made a mistake, Colin would tear them down, or even lash out physically. The divorce is moving quickly since they don't have children and kept their finances mostly separate. Dana said Colin isn't handling it well. He's been sending angry messages, blaming everyone but himself for the marriage falling apart. He only reached out to our dad last month, asking if they could repair their relationship. According to my dad, Colin spent the entire conversation complaining about how unfairly he's been treated and how nobody appreciates everything he's done for the family over the years. When my dad gently suggested that maybe he should consider apologizing to Ariana, or to the other kids he hurt, Colin said he had nothing to apologize for. In fact, he believes everyone owes him an apology. Rachel told me that Colin has also stopped seeing Jack regularly. She said Jack asked if he had to keep visiting his dad. When she asked why, Jack told her, "Dad always makes me feel bad about myself." Rachel decided not to force the visits anymore, and Colin hasn't protested. I have no regrets about any of the decisions I've made. Not going to his wedding was the right choice. Cutting contact was the right choice. Protecting Ariana from someone who saw her medical condition as a character flaw was absolutely the right choice. Some people might think it's sad that a family broke apart over a speech disorder and an engagement party. But it had to happen. With someone as narcissistic as Colin, there was no other way. Everyone in the family feels peace with the decisions we've made. And if Colin feels at peace with his, then good for him. He still thinks we are the problem. I don't believe there's any real damage in that. Update 4. Colin's divorce is now finalized, and it's hit his ego hard. Now he's feeling lonely and says he needs his family. But I'm still absolutely certain, I don't want Colin anywhere near me or my daughter. He's hinted at the idea of maybe apologizing to me or Ariana. But are those apologies genuine, or is it just the loneliness talking? I don't know, and honestly, I don't care. What the rest of the family decides to do is up to them. If they want to forgive him or not, that's their business. As for me, I'll simply continue avoiding any event where he might be present, or I'll leave if he shows up. I won't be around someone who once said he'd beat the stutter out of my daughter. Someone who has consistently been cruel to kids with disabilities of all kinds. And I doubt Aunt Joyce, Colin's ex-wife, or anyone else he's hurt feels any differently. In fact, I think he's been lucky. He's always gone after single moms. If he ever said something like that about a father's kid, he might have ended up on the floor with a black eye. Maybe my own dad would have done it, if it weren't his son. But even so, neither he nor my mom is speaking to Colin right now. As I've said before, I won't judge what others do. If they want to talk to him, fine. But I feel absolutely no guilt about walking away from my brother. Some might say loneliness is a kind of disability. After all, humans are social creatures. But in Colin's case, I'm not moved. I think he's exactly where he deserves to be. And I hope, for once, he gets the discipline and lessons he's always preached, so he can prove, through his own life, whether his views actually work. As for me, I'm staying focused on Ariana, who gets stronger every single day. And that's all that matters. I can live a perfectly good life without a brother. It's not like I lost an arm.